But here's something that doesn't make sense. You're making more money than ever before. Your salary went up. You got stimulus checks. The government literally sent you cash. And yet, you're poorer. Your grocery bill is double what was 3 years ago. Gas costs a fortune. Your rent increased again. That vacation you planned? Canceled. The house you wanted to buy? Completely out of reach now. Your retirement account might have bigger numbers, but you feel that it buys less. The government tells you it's Putin's fault. Then it's corporate greed. Then it's supply chains. You're told the economy is strong, while your purchasing power evaporates. You're not imagining this. You're not bad with money. Something fundamental is broken, and everyone seems to be lying about it. Here's a disturbing paradox. The more money the government prints, the poorer you become. That sounds backwards, doesn't it? More money should mean more wealth. That's common sense. But Milton Friedman, the economist who won the Nobel Prize in 1976, spent 50 years proving that common sense is exactly wrong here. And he didn't just prove it theoretically. He predicted with precision exactly what you're experiencing right now. In 1967, he warned about stagflation when every expert said it was impossible. In the 1970s, it happened exactly as he said. He explained why government promises about inflation are always wrong. Why central banks cause the very problems they claim to solve. Why your dollar buys less no matter how much they say they're helping. You've been living inside Friedman's monetary theory without knowing it. Every time you notice prices rising faster than your paycheck, every time you hear about quantitative easing and wonder what that actually means, every time the Federal Reserve makes an announcement and you feel anxious but don't know why, what if you could understand the actual mechanism, not as a passive victim of forces beyond your comprehension, but as someone who sees exactly what's happening and why? I know monetary theory sounds intimidating. You probably think you need an economics degree to understand how the Federal Reserve works, what inflation really is, why money supply matters. You've been told this is complicated stuff for experts. But here's what Friedman proved throughout his career. The most important economic truths are simple. Not simplistic, simple. There's a difference. Simplistic means dumbed down. Simple means clear, fundamental, true. In the next 15 minutes, you're going to understand Friedman's monetary theory through 5 steps, the same 5 steps he used to revolutionize economics and predict the future with disturbing accuracy. You'll learn what to watch, what to ignore, and how to protect yourself. You'll understand why inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, and what that actually means for your life. If you want to understand the economic thinkers who saw through the lies and told the truth about how money really works, subscribe to this channel. We explore the minds that changed everything. Let's start with something Friedman insisted on. Before you can understand monetary theory, you have to know what money actually is. Not what it represents, not what it should be, what it is. Here's how most people think about money. It's wealth. It's value. It's the thing you work for, save, and spend. When you have more of it, you're richer. When you have less, you're poorer. Simple, right? Friedman would stop you right there. That's not what money is. That's what money does, or what it's supposed to do. But confusing what something does with what something is leads to catastrophic misunderstandings. And governments exploit this confusion constantly. Money, Friedman explained, is a medium of exchange. It's not wealth itself. It's a tool we use to trade wealth. Think about it this way. You produce something valuable, your labor, your skills, your products. Someone else produces something different. You want what they have, they want what you have. But direct barter is impossibly inefficient. How do you trade half a day of accounting services for 3 pounds of coffee beans and a haircut? Money solves this. It's a universally accepted placeholder for value. You trade your accounting services for dollars. Then you trade those dollars for coffee and a haircut. The money didn't create wealth. It facilitated the exchange of wealth that already existed. Notice what this means. The amount of money in an economy has nothing to do with the amount of wealth in that economy. You could have twice as much money tomorrow, and the economy wouldn't be any richer. There wouldn't be more coffee beans, more accounting services, more haircuts. There would just be more paper or digital entries, claiming shares of the same amount of real stuff. This is where Friedman's insight becomes devastating to government narratives. When the Federal Reserve prints money, actually created electronically, they're not making the country richer. They're just making more claim tickets for the same amount of wealth. What happens when you have more claim tickets competing for the same amount of real goods? Each ticket becomes worth less. In 1970, Friedman testified before Congress. He told them directly, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. What he meant was brutally simple. When you increase the money supply faster than you increase the actual production of goods and services, prices rise. Always, everywhere, no exceptions. Politicians hated this. Still do, because it meant they couldn't blame inflation on greedy corporations or foreign oil or supply chain disruptions. Those things might affect relative prices. Oil gets more expensive compared to wheat, for instance, but general, sustained inflation, where everything gets more expensive, that's monetary. That's about how much money exists relative to how much stuff exists. You know what's fascinating? Friedman tested this across centuries and continents. Ancient Rome, Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Different cultures, different governments, different economic systems. The pattern was identical. Expand the money supply faster than the economy grows, and you get inflation. Always. Here's where you need to shift your thinking completely. When government sends you a stimulus check, they're not sending you wealth. They're sending you claim tickets. And if they sent everyone claim tickets without anyone producing more goods, those tickets just became worth less. You notice this at the grocery store. The number in your bank account went up, but the milk costs more. The money supply expanded, but the dairy farms didn't produce more milk. Understanding this first step changes everything. You stop thinking more money equals more wealth. You start thinking more money chasing the same goods equals higher prices. You're now thinking like Friedman, and you're ready for step 2. Once you understand what money actually is, Friedman's second step becomes obvious. If inflation is about money supply relative to goods and services, then you need to watch the money supply, not what politicians promise. Not what central bankers say they're going to do, what they actually do to the money supply. This sounds straightforward, but it requires understanding something crucial. The Federal Reserve has enormous incentive to hide what they're doing. Let me show you how this works in practice. In 2020, as the pandemic hit, the Federal Reserve expanded the money supply by the largest amount in American history. I mean massive expansion. In just a few months, they created more dollars than existed in the entire economy a few years earlier. M2 money supply, that's the measure economists watch, shot up by over 25% in a single year. What did the Fed say? Don't worry, this won't cause inflation. We're in a unique situation. The normal rules don't apply. What did Friedman's framework predict? Inflation. Lots of it. Not immediately, there's a lag. Usually 12 to 18 months. But inevitably, in 2021, inflation started rising. The government said it was transitory, just temporary supply chain issues from the pandemic. Nothing to do with monetary policy. Friedman, if he'd been alive, would have laughed. This is exactly the playbook he documented throughout his career. Expand money supply massively. Wait for inevitable inflation. Blame anything except monetary policy. By 2022, inflation hit levels Americans hadn't seen in 40 years. The same government that said it was transitory now blamed Putin's invasion of Ukraine, then corporate greed, then anything except the trillions of dollars they created. Friedman's method cuts through this instantly. Look at what happened to the money supply 12 to 18 months before inflation appeared. There's your answer. The rest is political theater. But here's where Friedman's insight gets really practical. He developed something called Friedman's rule, the idea that central banks should expand the money supply at a fixed, predictable rate matching economic growth, about 3 to 4% per year for the U.S. economy historically. That's it. No discretion, no stimulus, no manipulation. Just steady, boring, predictable growth that matches the actual productive capacity of the economy. Why? Because when monetary policy works properly, it becomes invisible. This is Friedman's brilliant thermostat analogy. A good thermostat keeps the room at constant temperature. You don't notice it working. You only notice when it breaks, when the room gets too hot or too cold. Good monetary policy is the same. You shouldn't notice it. Stable money supply growth, stable prices, an economy can focus on actual production instead of constantly adjusting to monetary chaos. But central banks hate this rule. Why? Because it takes away their power. If they follow a fixed rule, they can't claim credit for stimulating the economy during recessions. They can't claim they're fighting inflation with rate hikes. They become boring administrators of a mechanical process instead of economic wizards saving society. Friedman showed that every time the Fed tried to be smart, to fine-tune the economy by manipulating money supply based on current conditions, they made things worse. They'd see a recession starting and flood the economy with money. But by the time that money worked its way through the system, the recession was over and now you had inflation. Then they'd slam on the brakes to fight inflation, but the effects would hit when the economy was already slowing, causing the next recession. The Fed literally created the boom-bust cycle they claimed to be smoothing out. You see this right now. The Fed kept interest rates near zero for years, claiming the economy needed support. Money supply exploded. Now we have the worst inflation in 40 years, so they're hiking rates aggressively. What's going to happen? Friedman's framework predicts recession because monetary policy works with long lags, and they're tightening just as the earlier expansion's inflationary effects are peaking. The second step is simple but requires discipline. Ignore the speeches. Watch M2. When it expands faster than economic growth, expect inflation 12 to 18 months later. When it contracts, expect recession. The Fed isn't magic. They're predictable. If this framework is clicking for you, if you're starting to see through the fog, hit like so more people discover how to understand what's really happening to their money. And now you're ready for the really interesting part. How Friedman proved this theory by predicting the impossible. Here's where Friedman separated himself from every other economist of his era. He didn't just build elegant theories. He tested them ruthlessly against actual data, and he made specific, falsifiable predictions that could be proven right or wrong. This is step 3 in understanding his monetary theory. You have to see how he proved it worked by predicting things that couldn't happen according to the dominant theories of his time. The story of stagflation is absolutely critical here. In 1967, Friedman gave his presidential address to the American Economic Association. This was the Super Bowl of economics. Every important economist in the country was there, and Friedman stood up and said something that contradicted everything they believed. Government cannot permanently reduce unemployment by accepting more inflation. This was heresy. The entire economic establishment believed in something called the Phillips curve, the idea that you face a stable trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Want less unemployment? Accept more inflation. Want less inflation? Accept more unemployment. You can't have both low inflation and low unemployment, the theory said. So government should fine-tune the economy by choosing their preferred point on this trade-off curve. Friedman said this was completely wrong. He predicted that if governments try to reduce unemployment by inflating the money supply, they get temporarily lower unemployment, but only temporarily. People would adapt to the inflation. They demand higher wages to compensate. Businesses would raise prices, and you'd end up back at the natural rate of unemployment, Friedman's term, but now with higher inflation baked in. What's more, he predicted something the establishment said was theoretically impossible: stagflation. High inflation and high unemployment at the same time. Every Keynesian economist said this couldn't happen. It violated their models. It contradicted their theories. If Friedman was right, their entire framework for understanding the economy was wrong. What happened? The 1970s happened exactly as Friedman predicted. Oil shocks gave governments an excuse to inflate the money supply to stimulate the economy. Unemployment stayed high. Inflation soared. By the late 1970s, you had 10% unemployment and 13% inflation simultaneously. The impossible thing that couldn't happen according to Keynesian theory was the defining economic reality of the decade. Friedman's prediction made years earlier was vindicated with devastating precision. Notice what he did here. He didn't just say, "I think this is true." He said, "If my theory is correct, here's what will happen. If their theory is correct, here's what will happen. Let's watch and see." That's science. That's empiricism. That's how you know if you're dealing with truth or ideology. And this is crucial for you to understand Friedman's monetary theory. Don't take anything on faith. Not from him. Not from me. Not from anyone. Test it. Make predictions based on the theory. Then watch what happens. Try this right now. Friedman's theory says inflation is always a monetary phenomenon. So go look at any historical case of high inflation. Weimar Germany in the 1920s. Zimbabwe in the 2000s. Venezuela right now. Check what happened to their money supply before inflation exploded. Every single time, every time, you'll find massive monetary expansion preceded the inflation. Then look at the government's explanation in each case. It's never we printed too much money. It's always external factors. Reparations, sanctions, corporate greed, crop failures. The excuses change, but the denial is consistent. Friedman's empirical method cuts through this. He looked at data from dozens of countries over hundreds of years, different political systems, different cultures, different historical periods. The correlation between money supply growth and inflation was overwhelming, above 0.9 correlation, stronger than almost any relationship in social science. This is why Friedman's 1963 book, A Monetary History of the United States, changed economics forever. He and Anna Schwartz went through a century of American monetary data and showed definitively that every major inflation was preceded by monetary expansion, every major deflation by monetary contraction. They proved the Fed caused the Great Depression by allowing the money supply to contract by a third between 1929 and 1933. The third step is this: trust evidence over authority. When someone tells you this time is different, check the data. Friedman's theory predicts that it's never different. Expand money supply faster than economic growth. Get inflation. Contract it, get deflation. Test it yourself. Now you're ready to understand the mechanism, how this actually works in practice. Okay, you understand what money is. You're watching money supply instead of promises. You've seen Friedman's predictions come true. Now for step 4. How does expanding the money supply actually cause inflation? What's the mechanism? This is where a lot of economic education fails. They tell you more money causes higher prices, but not why or how. Friedman was obsessive about understanding the transmission mechanism, the path from monetary expansion to price increases. Here's the key insight. Money doesn't enter the economy evenly. It enters at specific points, and it spreads from there. This creates what Friedman called relative price effects before it creates general inflation. Let me make this concrete with what just happened. When the Federal Reserve created trillions of dollars in 2020 and 2021, where did that money go first? Not into your pocket directly. It went to banks. It went to financial markets. It went to people and institutions who were already wealthy and well-connected. What did they do with it? They bought assets, stocks, bonds, real estate. The stock market soared to record highs while most Americans were locked down. Housing prices exploded. The wealthy got massively wealthier because they got the new money first, before prices adjusted. This is called the Cantillon effect. And while Friedman didn't coin the term, His monetary theory explains it perfectly. The first recipients of new money benefit because they spend it at old prices. By the time that money circulates through the economy to wage earners like you, prices have already risen. You get the inflation without getting the money first. Watch how this worked. In 2020, the Fed expanded money supply. First, asset prices rose, stocks, houses, cryptocurrencies. People who owned those assets got richer on paper. Then those people spent more, they felt wealthy. They took out loans against their appreciated assets. They consumed more goods and services. Now businesses face more demand, but the same supply of goods. What happened? They raised prices. First on luxury goods, then on necessities. The money worked its way through the economy like a wave, raising prices as it went. By the time it reached you, the wage earner, in the form of maybe a small raise or stimulus check, the prices had already risen. Your nominal income went up, but your real purchasing power went down. Friedman documented this pattern across different monetary expansions. There's always a lag, usually 12 to 18 months from monetary expansion to consumer price inflation. There's always an uneven effect. Asset owners benefit first. Wage earners get hurt. There's always a political excuse. It's never blamed on the monetary expansion that caused it. But here's what's crucial about understanding this mechanism. It means you can protect yourself if you know what to watch. When you see money supply expanding rapidly, you know what's coming. You can move assets accordingly. Buy real estate or stocks before the inflation hits fully. Lock in fixed-rate debt before interest rates rise. Convert dollars into hard assets that hold value. This isn't about getting rich, though Friedman's framework has made plenty of people wealthy by predicting market movements. It's about not being destroyed. It's about maintaining your purchasing power while others lose theirs because they don't understand the mechanism. Friedman also explained why government always claims inflation is temporary. Because the initial monetary expansion does temporarily boost the economy. People feel richer. Unemployment drops as businesses expand to meet the new demand. Politicians claim credit for the boom, but it's fake. It's not based on actual productive growth, just more money chasing the same goods. When reality catches up, when prices adjust to reflect a larger money supply, the boom ends. Now you have higher prices and the underlying economic problems you try to solve with inflation. This is why Friedman argued so passionately against discretionary monetary policy. Central bankers always think they're smart enough to inject just the right amount of money at just the right time to stimulate growth without causing inflation. They're always wrong. The mechanism is too complex. The lag's too variable. The political pressure is too intense. The fourth step, understand that monetary expansion helps the first receivers, hurts the last receivers, and the lag between expansion and inflation is where all the mischief happens. One more step, and you'll have the complete framework. The fifth and final step in understanding Friedman's monetary theory is the most philosophically profound. Accept that government cannot manipulate the real economy permanently through monetary policy. This is Friedman's natural rate hypothesis, and it's the key to seeing through every economic promise politicians make. Here's what Friedman proved. There's a natural rate of unemployment determined by real factors: labor market flexibility, skill mismatches, geographic mobility, unemployment insurance policies, minimum wage laws. Monetary policy cannot change this natural rate permanently. It can only create temporary deviations that eventually snap back, leaving you worse off than before. Let me show you why this matters right now. Politicians constantly promise to create jobs through stimulus spending and easy money. The Federal Reserve promises to boost employment by keeping interest rates low. It sounds compassionate. Who doesn't want more jobs? Friedman would ask, what's actually happening? When you inflate the money supply to create jobs, you're not changing any real factors. You're not making workers more skilled. You're not making labor markets more flexible. You're not reducing regulatory barriers to hiring. You're just temporarily fooling people. Here's the mechanism. Money supply expands. Businesses see more nominal demand for their products. They hire more workers. Unemployment drops. Politicians declare victory. But workers notice prices rising. They demand higher wages to compensate. Businesses realize their increased nominal revenue isn't real increased demand. It's just inflation. They stop hiring. Unemployment returns to the natural rate. But now you're stuck with higher inflation. You tried to buy permanently lower unemployment with monetary expansion. You got temporarily lower unemployment and permanently higher inflation. Bad trade. This is what happened in the 1970s. This is what happened in the 2000s with the housing bubble. This is what's happening right now. Every time, the promise is the same. We'll stimulate the economy without causing inflation. Every time, the result is the same. Temporary stimulus, permanent inflation. The natural rate hypothesis applies to everything. There's a natural rate of economic growth determined by productivity, innovation, capital investment, property rights, the rule of law. You can't permanently exceed it by printing money. There's a natural interest rate determined by time preferences and investment opportunities. The Fed can't permanently suppress it without causing malinvestment. Friedman developed this insight by studying data, but it rests on a deeper truth. You can't create real wealth by manipulating symbols. Money is a symbol representing real goods and services. Changing the symbol doesn't change the underlying reality. It just creates confusion and redistribution. This is why Friedman was so passionate about rule-based monetary policy instead of discretion. If the Fed follows a simple rule, expand money supply at 3 to 4% annually matching long-term economic growth, you get stable prices. Everyone can plan. Businesses can invest. Savers can save. The economy focuses on producing real goods and services instead of constantly adjusting to monetary chaos. But when the Fed tries to be clever, lowering rates here, raising them there, stimulating during recessions, cooling during booms, they create the very instability they claim to prevent. Friedman called this the Fed's thermostat problem in reverse. Instead of keeping temperature stable, they're constantly overcorrecting, making it swing wildly. Here's what the natural rate hypothesis means for your life. Stop believing promises about what monetary policy can achieve. It cannot permanently reduce unemployment. It cannot make the economy grow faster than productivity allows. It cannot make everyone richer by printing money. What it can do is cause inflation by expanding too fast or deflation by contracting too fast. That's it. That's the only real power monetary policy has, to create price instability. When you accept this, when you internalize Friedman's natural rate hypothesis, you become immune to economic propaganda. When politicians promise stimulus will create jobs, you know it's temporary at best, inflationary for sure. When the Fed promises to support the economy with easy money, you know to protect your purchasing power because inflation is coming. The fifth step is accepting reality. Monetary policy cannot change real economic fundamentals. It can only create nominal confusion. Once you see this, you see everything clearly. You now understand Friedman's monetary theory, not as abstract academia, but as a practical framework for understanding the economy you live in every single day. Think about where you were 15 minutes ago. Inflation was this mysterious force that just happened. The Federal Reserve was doing things you didn't understand. You felt the pain in your wallet, but couldn't explain the cause. Politicians blamed Putin, corporations, supply chains, and you suspected they were lying but couldn't prove it. Now you have Friedman's framework. 5 steps that cut through the fog. You understand what money actually is, not wealth itself, but claim tickets on wealth. You know to watch the money supply, not the promises, because inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. You've seen how Friedman tested his predictions against reality and was proven right when impossible stagflation happened exactly as he said. You understand the transmission mechanism, how money enters unevenly, benefits asset owners first, and hits wage earners last with higher prices. And you've internalized the natural rate hypothesis. Government cannot permanently manipulate real economic variables through monetary policy. only create nominal confusion and inflation. This isn't just intellectual knowledge. This is practical power. You're no longer a confused victim. When you see money supply data, you know what's coming. When politicians promise stimulus without inflation, you know they're lying or ignorant. When the Fed announces policy changes, you understand the real effects versus the claimed intentions. More importantly, you're thinking like Friedman now. You're demanding evidence, not accepting authority. You're testing predictions against reality. You're looking at what people do, not what they say. This empirical rigor, this insistence on proof over theory, results over intentions. This is Friedman's deepest gift. And you recognize the pattern. Monetary expansion, asset price inflation, consumer price inflation, political excuses, attempts to fix the inflation they cause, recession, start over. You've seen this cycle your whole life without naming it. Now you can name it. You can anticipate it. You can protect yourself from it. The transformation isn't that you become an economist. It's that you become clear-sighted about one of the most important forces affecting your daily life. Money, inflation, the value of what you earn and save. Friedman spent 50 years making this clear. Now you have it in 15 minutes. Starting today, you're going to apply this framework to your real financial life. Here's exactly how. First, start watching M2 money supply. The Federal Reserve publishes this data. It's free. When M2 grows faster than 4% annually, expect inflation within 12 to 18 months. Adjust accordingly, buy hard assets, lock in fixed debt, don't hold cash long-term. Second, when you hear economic news, apply Friedman's test. Government announces stimulus? Ask, is this increasing money supply faster than economic growth? If yes, it's inflationary regardless of what they claim. Fed announces rate changes? Ask what's happened to M2. That tells you more than any speech. Third, protect yourself using Friedman's insights. During monetary expansion, real assets, property, stocks, commodities, preserve value better than cash or bonds. During monetary contraction, liquidity and cash become king. The framework tells you which environment you're in. Fourth, in debates, use Friedman's empirical method. When someone claims inflation is caused by corporate greed or Putin, ask, has corporate greed or geopolitical conflict existed in periods of low inflation? Then why is inflation high now specifically? Demand they explain the monetary data. They can't, because the data supports Friedman. Fifth, remember the natural rate hypothesis when evaluating promises. Any politician promising to permanently boost employment or growth through monetary stimulus is either lying or ignorant. Real growth comes from productivity, innovation, investment, not printing money. This protects you from false hope and bad policy support. You don't need to become a professional economist. You just need to remember these 5 steps when making financial decisions, evaluating economic news, or voting for policies. That's applying Friedman's monetary theory to your actual life. That's the point of understanding it. There's a moment in Friedman's debates I can't forget. He's facing a progressive economist who insists government can manage the economy better than markets. And Friedman asks, with that slight smile, can you name me one government program that has achieved its stated objectives? Silence, because the answer is devastating. No, they can't. Not welfare, not housing policy, not education spending, not monetary stimulus. The promises never match the results. But here's what Friedman understood that his opponents didn't. This isn't about intelligence. Central bankers aren't stupid. Politicians aren't all corrupt. The problem is they're trying to do something impossible. Centrally manage what can only work through decentralized knowledge and spontaneous order. Monetary policy is the perfect example. The Fed has the smartest economists, the most sophisticated models, unlimited resources, and they fail, repeatedly, predictably, because they're trying to manipulate millions of individual economic decisions with one blunt tool, the money supply. Friedman showed it cannot work. The data proved he was right. Imagine your life 6 months after truly internalizing this framework. You watch the news differently, with clear eyes instead of confused anxiety. You make financial decisions based on understanding instead of hope. You protect your family's wealth because you anticipate what's coming instead of reacting after the damage is done. This channel exists to rediscover thinkers like Milton Friedman, people who had the courage to tell the truth when everyone else was committed to comfortable lies. People whose ideas were proven right by the hardest test, reality. Subscribe if you want to continue this journey of economic clarity. In the next video, we'll explore Friedman's devastating critique of the Federal Reserve's role in causing the Great Depression, a story that will completely change how you see government's relationship to economic crisis. See you there. And meanwhile, may you think clearly about money, and may your purchasing power be protected by understanding.